the signal that sees everything. The first night the signal arrived, Eli thought it was a badly tuned station, a joke of static and half-formed voices slipping through long wave like fog. He lived alone in an attic above a shuttered haberdashery, where the ocean's breath slowed the town to a hush. He'd repaired radios longer than anyone else in Greyhaven, and yet his hands trembled as if they remembered something before language. The noise on the dial felt like attention, as if the air itself had turned its gaze to him. He recorded a minute, then another, because people believe proof will quiet the imagination. When he listened back the next morning, the recordings refused to be mere interference. Under the static, a sound threaded through, not quite voices, not quite music, a cadence that matched his footsteps, the exact rhythm of his old dog's collar clinking years ago. It played moments he had not recorded. The clack of Nora Vale's bicycle bell outside 3 nights earlier, a phrase his father used to say before leaving, the hollow cough he'd kept private. The more he rewound, the less he trusted the line between capturing and being captured. Started cataloging times, frequencies, the tiniest variations in pitch. Greyhaven's nights thickened around his obsession. Nora brought him soup once and lingered in the doorway, eyes wide at the catalogs and tapes stacked like evidence. She listened once, then another time, and then refused to say whether she heard anything but rain and the creak of an old house. Eli's notes filled pages, angles of reception, atmospheric pressure, lunar phases, an attempt to make the signal obedient to human logic. Logic offered him maps. The signal offered nothing but a conspiring attention. Once at 2 a.m, the recording paused itself, and a beat later returned with a sound like a small, private space being entered. It played the exact shiver that ran down Eli's spine, the precise inhale he makes before he speaks. It imitated without artifice. He realized the signal didn't only collect sound, it collected closeness, the intimacy of tiny, unremarked moments. He tried to explain it to Nora. "It's taking impressions," he said, and felt ridiculous naming a thing that seemed to do what a human eye never would. She smiled the way someone smiles at a meteorologist forecasting ghosts. Neighbors reported oddities the older the recordings grew. Keys misplaced in strange places, doors shut that had been left open, or a bird at a window that seemed to be looking directly at someone inside. No one linked these to Eli's tapes, because superstition sells faster than suspicion. He began carrying the recorder with him. In grocery aisles and on the pier, he pressed its microphone into the air, as if into the mouth of a sleeping animal, hoping to coax understanding. The signal obliged in fragments, a laugh he hadn't heard in years, a line from a play he once half remembered, a child's name he could not place. He grew less certain of when he was being observed by machines and when he was being observed by people. The signal began to answer him with timing too precise to be coincidence. He would hum a tune under his breath, and on the next playback, hear an echo that followed the tune a fraction of a second later, but with the faint warmth of someone else humming back from afar. It felt like conversation with a place that had learned the contours of his breath. At night, the house felt rearranged, not physically, but by attention, like a room that had been familiar until someone sat in it and read its books. He attempted to triangulate. He climbed the rusted ladder to the roof and trained the console's antenna toward the horizon, toward the black rectangle of the sea. He recorded for hours, bottles of coffee cooling, the town below blinking off like a string of tired lanterns. When he played the tapes back, the sea sounded wrong. Not water, but a long, thin choir, and threaded through it, the cadence of his own childhood home laughing. A moment on the tape matched exactly the way the clouds moved that evening, as if the sky itself paused to listen and then resumed. Fear arrived slowly, like a tide. He started dreaming of a room filled with radios stacked to the ceiling, each one tuned to a life he could not name. He woke sometimes with a sense of being recited, fragments of someone else's confession in his mouth. Nora said he should stop. That obsession corrodes the world until nothing remains but the thing you watch. He laughed then, a brittle sound, and for a week obeyed her counsel, setting the recorder on a shelf with magnets and books piled over it. The silence lasted 4 days. On the 5th, there was a single tape in his pocket he did not remember making. That tape was different. It opened with an ordinary street noise, a vendor calling, distant footsteps, then folded inward to reveal a private scene. Someone's kitchen table at dawn, the slow, methodical action of making tea, the exact way a hand would tap the rim of a mug. It wasn't his kitchen, and yet he knew the table's scar and the mug's chips as intimately as his own. He felt the strangest kind of guilt, the sense of being present in a life where he did not belong. To play it back again was to trespass, but curiosity compounded like interest. He could not stop listening. He tried to give the recorder away. He left it on a bench in the park with a note. "Please take this. It's dangerous." By nightfall, a woman had left it back at his doorstep with a folded napkin inside the case and a line scribbled, "Some things teach themselves." The town began to whisper in new ways, not about radio frequencies, but about being watched by the weather, by humming street lamps, by strangers with familiar faces. Faces in the market turned their eyes a fraction too long, as if nervous about what they'd reveal if they spoke. Eli felt the town rearranging itself around the knowledge of the signal. He began to test it. He whispered a lie into the microphone, something small, about the time he'd left work early and then left the house and watched the window from across the street. The tape, when played, confessed the truth he had withheld, not in words, but in the particular way the floorboard creaked and the door leaned after she left, details he had not intended to betray. It seemed the signal cared for truth in its own way. It did not judge, only observed, and then arranged the observations like a careful librarian. The arrangement felt less benign by degrees. On the last tape, which he would later pretend never to have made, the signal did something else entirely. After 38 minutes of indistinct ambient sound, there was a silence so precise it took up space, followed by the slow, deliberate sound of breathing, his breathing, and then a voice that wasn't his saying, plainly, "You know we're listening back." The voice had no malice. It was simply an inventory of reality, a census. Eli turned off the playback, hands numb. When he he dared to look through the rain-smudged window. A pale car idled across the street with a single headlight, as if someone were checking their mirrors. He walked out that night, recorder in hand, into the washed lamps of Greyhaven. He walked to the edge of the pier and set the device down as if offering it to the sea, to whatever had bridged sky, town, and memory. There was no explosion of revelation, no tidy origin, only the ocean breathing, and then, carried back on wind that smelled like iron and old paper, a thin layering of sound, the echo of his own steps away from the recorder. A copy of his own loneliness returned to him in stereo. He pressed record and spoke into the microphone, not a confession, but a question. Who are you? When he played that last tape months later, tucked into a drawer he rarely opened, the answer was not a name. It was a sound, layers of small things, pages turning, an old man's laugh, a child's shoes at a threshold, followed by the unmistakable noise of someone listening to the playback in a room far away. The final seconds held silence, thick and waiting, and then a faint, resolute click, like someone closing a book. The drawer remained warm for a moment after he let it fall closed. Eli could not know if the signal had been looking for him, or if he'd merely tuned the device to see what was always there. The last line of his notes read, "We record because we fear being alone, but perhaps the signal records because it fears the same."